That time again, everybody. Time for another Friday the 13th review. We are on the back half now, the dangerous, painful half, unfortunately. But Friday the 13th, the new... What the fuck happened to my camera? There, much better. Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood. So Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood, tells the story of Jason Voorhees once again resurrected to take down some teenagers, as well as a telekinetic teenager that is somewhat like Carrie, but not nearly as interesting as Carrie. Well, we're here, people, the Kane Hodder era of the Friday the 13th franchise. Kane Hodder most often is picked as the favorite portrayal of Jason by most Friday the 13th fans. Anytime I've seen a poll or any discussion on the best Jasons, worst Jasons, Kane Hodder, probably 60-70% of everybody always says Kane Hodder's my favorite, Kane Hodder's the best, Kane Hodder's the definitive Jason, Kane Hodder's the best Jason, and I gotta be honest with you, I don't quite get it. But I'll explain further once I get to that section. We're gonna start off with the positives of The New Blood, as always, and I will say, now that we've gotten back to having Jason with Friday the 13th, Jason Lives, and having a little bit more fun with the franchise, this film does try to continue that fun tone. And it tries to go for more of kind of a goofy B-movie, kind of embracing the tone of what the Friday the 13th movies are at its heart, and just have some fun with it. And you could tell that at some point they all were sitting around some kind of a boardroom table trying to spitball ideas on where we can take this franchise next. And somebody said, you know, it'd be awesome, Jason versus Carrie. But unfortunately we can't have Carrie. So we're gonna have to make our own character with telekinetic powers. And on paper, that concept is actually pretty cool. When you think about all of the big horror icons, you never really have a character that can honestly face off against them and go toe-to-toe and actually like fight them hand-to-hand or mind-to-hand, whatever you want to call it. And it's an interesting kind of direction to take it and say, okay, you know, we're going to have somebody face off against Jason that can actually go toe-to-toe with him. Because we've never seen that in this franchise before. Even with Tommy Jarvis. Tommy Jarvis does not take on Jason hand-to-hand or really even one-on-one. Another huge positive for me for this movie is this is one of my favorite looks for Jason, period. Jason looks badass in this movie. He's all rotten and kind of decrepit from being underneath the water for so long. He's almost like half skeleton. You can see his spine and, you know, some other areas of his skin is eroded away and you just see this skeletal underneath him. He's got this badass little chain necklace that's coming down from the chain that was holding him down at the end of Jason Lives. The look of Jason in this movie is maybe my first or second favorite. I'm not quite sure. I think I like the classic Jason look probably the best, but as far as kind of going off the wall and having Jason have changed his looks, this is probably my favorite. I think it looks awesome. And like I was talking about at the beginning too, I enjoy the fact that this movie kind of continues that trend that was started with Jason Lives about just having fun with the concept. You know, not taking Friday the 13th too seriously, knowing how goofy and schlocky it is, and just running with it. Just having a good concept to have fun with the movie, because this is a fun concept, and if you're into it, it makes for a fun movie. Now, I have an interesting relationship with this movie, because the first time that I saw it a couple of years ago, I thought this movie was trash. I thought this was the beginning of the end for the Friday the 13th franchise, and this was like the huge downhill slope after Jason Lives started with this movie. Now, I watched this movie again about a month ago when I was marathoning this franchise while I was doing some of these other reviews, and I really enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun with it. I don't know if I was just in a good mood or I kind of shut my brain off or whatever, but I watched Part 7, The New Blood, and I had a good time with it. Now, in preparation for this review, when I was actually going to talk about The New Blood, I rewatched the movie again, and unfortunately, I think it sucks again. So I don't know if it's just one of those things where, you know, my mind switches off and on. Lee, I had one of your moments, man. But The New Blood, I gotta be honest, I don't think this movie is very good. So from here on out, it's all negative. So I'm gonna start off with Yes, they had a good concept about Jason versus Carrie, but the execution, not so much. First of all, just the character of Tina, just not a very interesting character. All they give her is that she has telekinetic powers.
Look, I don't know how any of this is going to help me.
Your psychokinetic ability is a projection of the suppressed guilt feelings that you have.
Would you speak English? You're more interested in this telekinetic stuff than you are in me.
That is not true, Tina. The only reason that I'm here is to help you overcome the guilt that you have about your father's death. That's all.
That's bullshit!
I rest my case.
She kills her dad because he's abusive at the beginning of this movie, and it's a weird scene. She just stares at him and kills his ass. And then you get into it, and she's just a regular teenager that's just struggling and trying to get into society a little bit, and has a little bit of a social struggle with people her age because she has this telekinetic powers, and it just, that's all you get. You don't get to know this character very well. You don't really get inside of her head. You don't really get any kind of personality. She's just another character that just happens to stare at the screen once in a while and some shit moves. So not a big fan of their execution of that Carrie style character. And speaking of characters, holy fuck, the side characters in this movie are horrible. Up until this point, there's been some bad acting. There's been some bad characters. There's been some really bad execution on the character side of things with a couple of these Friday the 13th movies. Not until part 7 has it been completely annoying to the point where I want the fucking movie to end, or I want Jason to just murder all of them as fast and as violently as possible, just so I don't have to hear their fucking mouth anymore. Because, God, the characters, the teenagers that are off having the party down the street from Tina, some of the worst characters in a slasher that I have ever seen. Honestly, the most disappointing aspect of this movie, because had the MPAA not stuck their dick in the ass of this movie, it probably would have been something that made this movie one of the more fun installments of this franchise for me. The kills are so watered down and hacked to death that they suck to me. I mean, all of them are cutaway kills. All the money shots are gone. There's hardly any gore in this movie because they take all of it out. I mean, if you find the footage for some of these kills, the way that they were shot and originally intended to be in this movie would have been kick-ass. It would have been schlocky, but it would have been kick-ass for the kills alone, especially bringing in the Kane Hodder era of Jason. But after the MPAA got done with this movie, the kills are nothing. Like, it's almost PG rating how bad these kills are just hacked to death in this movie. So unfortunately, that's not the fault of the filmmakers, but that's just how this movie is. There's no other cut of it. I would love to see an unrated cut or a director's cut or something. The fuck you MPAA cut, I want to go with that one. Just release a Blu-ray with the original kills and I will enjoy this movie because the kills would have been badass, but they're just watered down as hell.
Change your mind or what? Melissa?
Another negative that I have with this movie, which seemed like it shouldn't be something that would stand out so much, but it did to me, is I really don't like the way that they shot the setting of this movie. It's supposed to be the same thing. It's supposed to be Camp Crystal Lake, but the Camp Crystal Lake we've seen in the other movies is a really beautiful place. When you get to this movie, it looks like garbage. It looks like a dump. And it's because they moved all the production, I believe, to Alabama or something for this movie and didn't shoot in the regular area that they were used to shooting for these movies. And it just has a totally different look about it. It doesn't look like Camp Crystal Lake. It looks like some rundown pond. So it's a little nitpick, I will admit to that. But when I'm watching all these movies in succession and you get to this one, it's like, damn, what happened to Camp Crystal Lake? Honestly, just overall, this whole movie just feels cheap. It feels rushed. I believe they did the whole thing in 6 months. From the time they started the production to the time it was in theaters was like 6 months. That's insane to think about, but whatever. When you get to this movie, it just feels like the quality totally drops off. I mean, whenever you get a great sequel like Jason Lives that kind of breathes life into the franchise, whether or not it was the most financially successful or not, quality-wise, it breathes some new life into it. And then you get to part 7 and it's just a huge, steep decline in quality, decline in effort, decline in the look. I mean, it just feels like something that would have been like a direct-to-DVD sequel nowadays, whereas Jason Lives was like the last theatrical release. It's such a huge, steep change in quality to me that it just feels weird, especially when you watch them in marathons. So this is, unfortunately, the beginning of the shitty era of the Friday the 13th movies, so it earns that spot for a reason. This movie feels cheap. Now I want to talk a minute about Kane Hodder. I'm not going to classify this as a negative necessarily. It's kind of in between because I do like most of what Kane Hodder does. I just feel like he is so overrated for his performance as Jason. Like, I'm going to do a ranking of all of the Jason characters, or the Jason actors that portray the character in my order of which ones I like the best and like the worst. And spoiler alert, Kane Hodder's not even in the top 4. So I just don't understand why Kane Hodder to everybody is like this huge, definitive, like, that's the iconic Jason. Kane Hodder should have played Jason through the whole franchise. He should be playing Jason now. He's good, I guess, but I just don't think that he brings that much to the character, especially in this one. Now, there's a movie later on that I will say that he actually puts a little bit more into it, but for this movie, for his intro, I just don't feel like he puts that much of a stamp on the character of Jason. He's just a little bit bulkier because of the dude's size, and he breathes a lot. You'll see this a lot in Kane Hodder's Jason. But beyond that, he doesn't really do anything to further this character, to like bring this new era of Jason. It just feels like kind of a watered down version of what Ted White did or what Richard Brooker did. Now, I know it's an unpopular opinion, but that's my opinion. I felt like talking about it since this is the Kane Hodder intro. I don't think Kane Hodder's all that great in this role. I'm sorry. He's okay, but I don't think he's really that definitive. And something else that bothered the hell out of me watching this one, I think the opening of this movie and the closing, as far as the resurrection and the death of Jason, is god-awful. I think that the resurrection is sorry as fuck. Just an unexplained psychic energy brings this dude back. That makes no sense to me whatsoever. And that's a cheap-ass, very uncreative way to bring Jason back. And then you get to the death of Jason, and apparently just zombie dad comes out of the fucking water, puts the chain back on him, and that's all you needed to do. Okay, if all you needed to do was put a chain around the fucker's neck to kill him, why didn't Tina just do it with her damn mind powers? Wrap a chain around his ass and put him in the lake. Problem solved. No, makes no sense. Fuck it. And my final negative for this movie is just the pacing, honestly. It got to the point where I actually wanted this movie to end soon because the first 2/3 of it is just dreck. It feels like, oh my god, this is such a cheap, watered-down version of movies that are much better earlier in the franchise. And once you get into the actual section of the movie where it is Jason versus Tina and there's a bunch of crazy special effects and there's a lot of showdown shit going on, then this movie has its own identity, then this movie's entertaining. But it takes so long to get there, and everything before that is just shitty. So overall, guys, I gotta be honest, I'm not a fan of The New Blood. I don't recommend this movie. Maybe I'll watch it a 4th time and suddenly I'll like it again. If I do, maybe I'll do a revisited review. But I just, at the time right now when I've watched The New Blood, not a fan of it. This movie feels very cheap. It feels like a huge decline from the quality and the fun and the breath that was breathed into this fucking franchise in Jason Lives, the new life. It just feels like it kind of got squandered in this one, in a movie that was directed by a special effects guy. So I mean, it's no secret why this movie kind of sucks. So unfortunately, if they would have just made the kills better, I would have enjoyed it more. But since there's just no carnage candy, I don't really love Kane Hodder's version of Jason. I think that their execution of Tina is not very good. The characters are terrible. The setting's not shot very well. This movie is just a not very good Friday the 13th movie. Not a very good sequel, and unfortunately, the beginning of the decline of this franchise. So if you're a Friday the 13th fan, I recommend you watch one of the previous movies, or maybe a movie that I'm going to be talking about later on in this franchise before I would recommend this one. Until there's an unrated cut on Blu-ray, I'm going to have to tell you to skip it. So what do you guys think of Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood? Are you on the end that loves this movie and loves the introduction of Kane Hodder and loves the Tina versus Jason showdown? Or do you agree with a lot of my grievances and think this is kind of a cheap runoff sequel that just kind of has a huge decline in quality from the previous ones and has some of the worst characters that you have ever seen? Whatever you think about The New Blood, guys, put it down in the comment section below and let's talk about some Jason. Please like and share this video. Hit that subscribe button if you're not already a subscriber. If you guys want to check out my social media links, I've got Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Spreadshirt, a cool little Spreadshirt store with some designs for some t-shirts and shit you guys will enjoy, as well as my Patreon page, all down in the video description below, so please check that out, guys. And if you want to check out some more of my videos, including the rest of this Friday the 13th franchise review series, you can check those out by clicking right over here.